We begin with Congressman Jordan, the ranking Republican on the House Judiciary Committee. He would likely chair the committee if Republicans take the House this fall. Now, as such, you'd think he'd have deep respect for congressional committees and the work they do, especially when it comes to oversight and investigation, both of which he vigorously pursued back when Republicans ran the House. So why then did he just snub a request to meet with the House Select Committee on January 6? Well, in his letter to the committee, he said he had, quote, no relevant information that would assist the Select Committee in advancing any legitimate legislative purpose. Now, notice he doesn't say he has no relevant information that would assist the committee in its investigation, only in, quote, any legitimate legislative purpose, which he's already made plain he doesn't believe the committee has. It's a way of being less than honest without appearing to be, frankly, because if the question is, does he have anything of interest to the committee and its investigation, the answer clearly is, yeah, he does. Here's committee member Adam Schiff talking about text messages to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in and around the insurrection.
I want to display just a few of the messages he received from people in Congress. If we could cue the first graphic. This one reads, on January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as President of the Senate, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all.
So that message he read was from Congressman Jordan. Now, it's a dubious legal theory on overturning the election, which he forwarded. So you can see why the committee might want to talk to him about that. Again, this is the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee fronting a theory for a potential coup. The same Jim Jordan, who's rarely at a loss for words, except it seems when asked about something else the committee wants to know about, his conversations with the former president that day.
On January 6th, did you speak with him before, during, or after the Capitol was attacked?
I'd have to go. I spoke with him that day after. I think after. I don't know if I spoke with him in the morning or not. I just don't know. I'd have to go back and. I mean, I don't know that when those conversations happened. But what I know is I spoke with him all the time.
So this is a guy who prides himself on his ability to pepper witnesses with rapid-fire questions and bullet points, which he likes to rattle off at warp speed. Seems like it's different on the receiving end, doesn't it? Or maybe that's how he thinks people talk when they've got nothing to hide, which he has repeatedly claimed. Here he is in July with CNN's Manu Raju.
That's right. They said, you had conversations with them going up to January 6th. So.
Yeah, but I'm conversating with the president all the time.
Oh, okay. But if they said, if they asked you to come, you would say, sure.
Watch. Yeah, if they call me, I got nothing to hide.
Nothing to hide, he said in July, and here he is in October saying the same at contempt proceedings for Steve Bannon.
Are you willing to tell the Select Committee what you know about events leading up to, during,
I've been clear all along. I've got nothing to hide. I've been straightforward all along.
Notice again how slippery the language is. In both instances, he's asked whether he's willing to talk to the committee, and both times he answers, I have nothing to hide. He doesn't say, yeah, I'll talk to the Select Committee. That's how Washington works. Really something special. Especially for somebody who once lectured former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton during the endless Benghazi hearings about transparency.
Last month, on September 20th, you said, quote, I'm being as transparent as possible, more transparent than anybody else ever has been. Now, my definition of transparency includes being honest and straightforward, and being honest and straightforward right from the start, right from the get-go.
Joining us for more on this, CNN's Ryan Nobles at the Capitol, who just spoke with the congressman. What did he say?
Well, Anderson, we tried to press him more on these questions about his willingness to cooperate or lack thereof with the January 6th Select Committee. And I asked him if his letter meant that he'd completely shut down the door or close the door to talking to the committee. And all he would do was refer me back to this letter. He said that the letter answers all the questions that we might have. So I pressed him a little more. I asked, would you be willing to sit in front of the committee in a public hearing and answer questions that everyone can hear and see? Again, he just referred me back to that letter. And then I asked him, you said at one point that you have nothing to hide. You still have nothing to hide. He again said that he had nothing to hide, but then went on to say all the problems that he has with the committee, the way that it was formed, the way that they've handled their business up until this point, but then again refused to say whether or not he would talk to the committee. And then finally, the last thing we asked him, Anderson, is whether or not he's had any communication with the former President Donald Trump and his legal team as it relates to his interaction with the committee. He simply would not answer that question, just referred us back once again to that letter.
There's also new reporting late tonight on former Vice President Mike Pence in regards to the committee. What do we know?
Yeah, so what this New York Times report echoes, a lot of our reporting already, is that the former Vice President Mike Pence does seem to be at least open to the idea of speaking to the January 6th Select Committee, but he has not yet decided whether or not he's willing to do it. What the Times report does get into, which could be of a concern to the committee, is that Pence is a little upset about the perception about the level of cooperation with a number of aides that worked for him in and around the time of January 6th and how much they've been talking to the committee. Now, we know that Mark Short, his former chief of staff, has been subpoenaed with the committee. He's expressed a willingness to cooperate. And of course, his former national security advisor, Keith Kellogg, already sat for a lengthy deposition with the committee and told us afterwards that he was willing to cooperate. Now, it appears that Pence does not want to be seen as a full willing participant of the committee's investigation, perhaps because of some blowback that could provide him with those close to the former President Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, Anderson, he's not closed the door to the idea of speaking with the committee, and we know very specifically from the chairman and other members of the committee that they are very interested in hearing from the former vice president.
Ryan Nobles, appreciate it. Thank you. Joining us now, two former Republican Congress members, Mia Love, who's now a CNN political commentator, and Joe Walsh, host of the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh. Congresswoman Love, Jim Jordan, clearly relevant to the January 6th investigation. He was speaking to the former president at the time, on the day apparently, but without any details. He hasn't said when or how often. Does it surprise you at all that a former sitting congressman is basically blowing off a congressional committee?
Well, it's really interesting to me that the committee decided to summon him and not subpoena him, which is a big difference. And in my experience, members of Congress give each other a little bit of grace period, which is a little bit of grace when it comes to hearings, because they respect them as former members of Congress. So I think it's really interesting that they actually summoned and not subpoenaed him. And I think that also Jim Jordan is probably looking and saying, hey, I was on the list to begin with. They didn't use me then. They probably don't need me now. I think that he should go. But my guess is this is the dynamic that's playing out in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, Congressman Walsh, you also served in the House with Jim Jordan. You said you used to be good friends. What do you think his end game is here? I mean, politically, I understand why he wouldn't do it. It certainly plays to the people who support him, I assume.
Anderson, this is what's so sad about this Republican Party. Jim Jordan, who I do know well, can't testify in front of this committee because if he testified under oath, he'd have to tell the truth. And if Jim Jordan told the truth about that day, his career as a Republican would be over because he'd have to say that he communicated with the president and Donald Trump incited the insurrection and they tried to get the president to act and he wouldn't act. That's the truth. And Jim Jordan knows all of that. But Anderson, if he said that, the average Republican voter out there would be done with Jim Jordan. I mean, that's where the Republican Party is today. You simply can't tell the truth.
You know, it's so interesting, Joe, you're saying this, because, I mean, even a guy like Jim Jordan, who has bent over backwards to support the former president, who has, pushed the big lie, repeatedly gone to the mat for the former president, you're right. Even if he did testify and he just told the truth, that would nullify all the other debasement he's done of himself for the former president in the eyes of the former president and his supporters. This former president will attack anyone who tells the truth, even if they have been incredibly loyal to him.
Anderson, I'm not the only one to say this. The Republican Party is a cult. I know a lot of people say that, but what does that mean? That means they are all beholden to Donald Trump and the base of the party, which is beholden to Trump. And as a cult, you can't speak the truth. Look at Mike Pence. Look at all the supplicating he did to Donald Trump for 4 or 5 years. And then on January 6th, Anderson, he does his constitutional duty. And as far as the Republican Party base is concerned, he's done.
Yeah.
Jordan knows that.